Cancer, welcome to your reading. This is going to be your full moon in Aquarius forecast for the upcoming full moon that we've got on the 3rd of August. So this takes place in the middle of the Lionsgate portal, and if you haven't seen my video, my I Ching message on the Lionsgate portal, I do urge you to do so, because this is going to be quite an intense time, and I think that the energy of that portal is going to kind of overlay whatever happens to us in terms of you know, the sort of lunar phase energy. So I will link that at the end of my video so that you can find it easily, but it should also be on the front page of my channel. Anyway, let's get into your reading and see what wants to come out, what messages we've got for this upcoming full moon. So as usual, this will be a 2-week phase. It will begin at the full moon on the 3rd, and then it will last for the 2 weeks of the waning moon cycle that follow. And at the moment, you're probably very aware of this, Cancer, given how moon ruled you are. The solar months are a little bit out of sync with the lunar calendar. So we've got full moons at the beginning of the month and then new moons at the end, which I think is quite fitting, actually, if you hear what people like Abigail Wainwright are saying, where they're kind of talking about how the nature of time is changing. So it seems quite fitting that everything is sort of inverted. Oh, the other thing I should say is that I've had quite a few inquiries about the cards that I use here on the channel for this, you know, when I do my readings. I made this casting cloth, and I also printed my own cards. So people have asked me if I would consider, you know, maybe producing some cards to go with the ebook that I did, the Introduction to Geomancy, the Oracle of the Elements. And it's definitely something that I'm going to consider, because I don't think that these cards read particularly well on video. You can't really see them, so I'm going to redesign them anyway. And you know, and once I do that, I will probably offer them with a print version of the book. You know, initially, you know, maybe just to post out in the UK, because I'm not sure about how well you know, these things will sort of travel in, you know, in terms of post and so on. But anyway, I'll keep you updated and make announcements on my YouTube channel further down the line once that is all sorted. So one more shuffle. Let's just give this a good right, let's see what's happening for you. Okay, Cancer. So at the moment, I think you're probably in this Lionsgate energy. I feel this strongly when I see a Missio here. This is Venus in Taurus, and it's all about being aware of the kind of transience of the material world, of the 3D world of embodiment, life in embodied form. You know, I mean, nature is a miracle, and it's absolutely wondrous, but you know, within nature we get these cycles of kind of birth and death, and we know that nothing lasts in its, you know, current form. It's always kind of metamorphosing, and I feel that you're very aware of the transience of things, of kind of you know, how nothing stays the same. And I think that can be very difficult energy for Cancerians in particular to deal with, because Cancer is so concerned with security and feeling safe, that I think that this can be quite destabilizing if we you know, if we allow it to sort of overwhelm us. So as I say, I do think you would benefit from watching that I Ching video. I think it will bring you some comfort. Yeah, it does look as though you're kind of in mourning, and not, I mean, this could be for a family member. This is Tristia, which is about tears or sadness. You know, this is kind of grief and loss, and it's in your house of family and roots and home. So it could be on some level that you know, in the 3D world, that you have actually experienced one of those three things, and you know, in which case I do send my heartfelt condolences. Um, but I think for most of you Cancerians, this is more about either being, you know, feeling kind of separated from loved ones, possibly as a result of travel restrictions at the moment. Um, but I think equally it's also about not being able to, you know, to sort of have people in your home, you know, because you love to entertain Cancer, and you love to have people, nurture people in your home, kind of cook for them and look after them. And I think this sort of long-term social distancing is proving to be quite traumatic and quite stressful for you. You kind of need your sort of nearest and dearest around you, and you need to be able to sort of touch base with them in order to sort of feel that everything is right in the world. And I think that at the moment that has kind of got you in a bit of a wobble. Right, let's have a look at what else is going on. Okay, so when it comes to one-to-one relationships, so things are looking good. So this is Venus in her iteration, in the sign of Libra. So it's the other sign that she rules, and this indicates harmonious relationships, particularly when it comes to marriage, partners, spouses, long-term committed partnerships, that kind of thing. So it's certainly not all doom and gloom when it comes to relationships. You know, this could be more to do with an actual home, a house. Maybe you are not enjoying where you're living, or you have had to move out for some reason. I mean, it could be evictions, but I think for most people, you know, those have been kind of put off. But yes, at least there is some good news here. There does definitely seems to be sort of the promise of romantic success. So if you're single and you're hoping to meet somebody that's got the potential to go the distance, this certainly indicates that that is a possibility during this particular waning moon cycle. I mean, it could be that, you know, full moons can sometimes be about culminations or things coming to fruition. So maybe there's a, you know, a marriage proposal on the cards, a higher level of commitment, some offer being sort of coming in for you. So so that's something to look forward to during this particular phase, even if family matters are not going so well. Oh wow, so here is these are definitely the silver lining. Here we've got clouds, here's the silver lining. So up here in your 10th house you have Laitisha, which is Jupiter in Pisces, and this is really upbeat energy. It's very enthusiastic, it is joyful, it's about emotional expansion. So these are about positive emotions. So it looks as though you're going to have something to celebrate when it comes to either something to do with your career, or perhaps as a result of you know, a position in public office, or it could be simply feeling that you're on track as far as your soul's purpose is concerned. You know, so that sense of celebration and joyfulness within you, in sort of deep within you on a soul level, where you feel like you're kind of on track. So an interesting start to your reading, Cancer. I'm just going to pause while I do the rest of the geomantic conversions, and then we'll continue with your reading in a bit more depth. Hi Cancer, welcome back. So I've done all the geomantic conversions, which means we can get into reading in more detail. So let's start with the full moon itself. Now, this moon happens in Aquarius, and for you that's all about your 8th house. So this is where the moon will be during this particular full moon phase. On the opposite side of the zodiac will be the sun in Leo, which is here in your 2nd house. And so this pair of houses, this group of houses, is all about resources and possessions. Now, these can be both physical possessions, such as, for example, earned income, as well as our assets, our kind of material assets, what we own. But it can also be about ephemeral things. So, you know, if we think about well, let's take it a step back. So let's talk physical. So as I said, this is about earned income and the assets that you own. The 8th house is about assets that you co-own, that you jointly own, usually with one other person or with an institution. So it tends to be about things like bank loans, taxes, as well as inheritances, so legacies, divorce settlements, alimony, grants that we get, anything of that nature. Not so much winnings, that tends to be more kind of 5th house, but it's things that we co-own, often with whoever is in the 7th house. So this can be, for example, a business partner. If you're in some kind of joint venture, then you'll co-own assets here. However, possessions and resources can also be intangible. So they can be things like your skills, what you value about yourself. So your personal attributes that you feel make a difference, or that others value in you. And then on the other hand, this is about attributes or qualities that we value within the context of communion, usually with one other person. So this can be things like physical intimacy, it can be about trust, it can be about sort of intellectual property, for example, and sort of the institutions or contracts that sort of bind these two things goes hand in hand with the 7th house, which is often about kind of marriage contracts, legal contracts, that kind of thing. So this is the axis that's being activated for you at this particular full moon. So it may be that something is coming to a head or coming to a close in that area, and this is emphasized actually by the geomantic cards that are in these two houses. So here we've got a missio again, so it's a repeat of the card that you had in your 1st house. So this really seems to be on your mind as you kind of come into this full moon energy. And as I said, a missio is about everything from this sense of transience, of things passing, of nothing being permanent, but it can also be about more literal things like theft, financial ruin. It can be about debt, it can be about self-sabotage, and here particularly I'm thinking about relationships, because very often if we sabotage ourselves in relation to our relationships, it's because we don't value ourselves. There's a self-worth issue. So you can see how the two things are linked. Now it can also be about that feeling of something being just out of reach or unattainable, and I think that essentially the message that you're getting at this particular full moon, and it's a message that I think is universal for the collective, is that on some level we're having to let certain things go. Certain things are not meant to last, and the time for them to leave is now. So I think that's really going to be what's on your mind. Now that doesn't mean that because we know that something should go, that we don't feel the need to mourn it, that there isn't grief, there isn't a sense of loss. And I think this may be why we have geomantic figures like Tristia popping up here as well, is that there is this need to kind of grieve whatever you are letting go of. But on the positive side, you've got a lot of really positive geomantic figures in this reading. So here in the 2nd house where the sun will be, we've got Puella. So it's an iteration here of what's happening in your 7th house. And again in your 9th house too. So I do feel as though, while there may be kind of losses, it's a case of swings and roundabouts. Sometimes things have to move or kind of make way so that better things can come in. And that's what I'm seeing for you here in your 2nd house. So this could be about, income, earned income, or something coming to you, say, from an inheritance, a beautiful painting, for example, a piece of jewelry, because Libra does rule kind of art and beauty. It could also be that you are entering into some kind of arrangement, such as, for example, coming into a sort of contractual arrangement with an employer, for example, to teach about art, for example, or something to say relationship counseling, something of that ilk, because you've got Fortuna Major here in your 6th house, which is the house of work, and this is an extremely positive card. This is the sun in Leo, and of course we're in Leo season at the moment. This is the sun. This is where the sun is at the time of this particular full moon. The other thing I feel called to share and to remind you of is that this full moon may have links to that new moon in Aquarius that we had back in January. So there may be a link to what happens now that is kind of a continuation, or the sort of something coming full circle from that time. And the reason that I say that is because at the full moon, we're going to have the sun and the moon making two aspects. The first is a square to Uranus and Taurus, which for you sits in your 5th house. So it's interesting because Aquarius is so much to do with groups or kind of your soul tribe, about, you know, where you fit in, where you belong, you know, within this sort of the greater kind of social kind of milieu, you know, that where you feel you belong in terms of your soul tribe. So this is one step up from family. And here we've got populace, which is the card of groups, community, and collective sort of action or events. So it's interesting. I kind of feel as though there may be an uncomfortable shift, because this is a square after all, a Uranus square, but there may be an uncomfortable shift that involves, you know, potentially sort of losing something or letting something go. But then the sort of silver lining is that you may then come into alignment with people who are like-minded. So for example, fellow artists, people who are creative, that may be you know, what's coming up here with Puella. You know, more creative people kind of coming into your life, people that you feel less kind of crazy with, you know, people who are like you. It could also be about breaking free from certain beliefs or expectations about, you know, social beliefs or expectations about how you should live. And that's because we've got Puella here in your 9th house, so it's kind of reiterating the energy of the 7th and the 2nd. So as I was saying, you've got this T-square between the sun, the moon, and Uranus here in your 5th house. So this is a kind of a tension between kind of the old and the new, if you like. So something has to kind of go or shift. It might be a little bit painful, but out of that will come new perspectives, new people, new situations that I think will end up being beneficial. As I say, change for you is quite traumatic, and so that is, I think, what you are, this is what is being reflected to you by this particular T-square. The good news is, though, that the sun and the moon will also be making a healing set of aspects to Chiron. So Chiron is in Aries, which is in your 10th house, and this is also where Mars is. So Mars is currently in Aries. So as we can see, we've got this wonderful geomantic figure here, Laitisha, which is all about expansion, happiness, joy, enthusiasm. So I kind of feel as though, you know, as I say, even though things change may be traumatic for you, there's definitely an upside here, and that is a lot of healing taking place, particularly when it comes to matters to do with the past. And Chiron usually for me is about wounds that we sustained round about the age of puberty, so around about the age of sort of 12 or 13. But what comes from this, I think, is an enormous well of happiness, and I think this is really, to me, a reflection of the whole Lionsgate portal process that's happening this year. There's a kind of a death and a rebirth happening. So that's the good news. There are going to be some bumps in the road. I'm not going to lie, this is not going to be an easy time. We've also got here Mars making a square to Jupiter here just after this full moon in the 7th house. So it could be that there needs to be a little bit of adjustment when it comes to the pace at which kind of agreements or relationships form, commitments, or it could have something to do with one person having issues with taking a risk, you know, taking a leap of faith. One person might be very keen to sort of speed things up, and the other person may want to sort of slow things down because the pace feels a little bit scary. So that's just something to be aware of. The other thing, of course, is that you've got Mercury currently transiting through your sign of Cancer, and as I said, Mercury is going to be making a couple of oppositions to the 3 planets that are in Capricorn. So this is Jupiter, Saturn and Pluto. So these started on the 30th of July, and they will continue until around about the 5th of August or so. So just before and just after this particular full moon. And so that energy is also going to add another layer to what happens around about this time. So quite a high point in terms of emotions. Don't be surprised if you feel a little bit overwhelmed, and I think that the key is just to sort of pace yourself and to give yourself the space you need to kind of process whatever comes up. So oppositions essentially are about balancing, and we can see here that there is already a contrast between the geomantic seagulls that we have in your 1st and your 7th house. So this is the line of your horizon, and you know the theme of the horizon I think is going to be very big during this Lionsgate portal. You can read all about that in the blog post that I did on my website, where I talk a lot about the importance of the horizon, particularly for the ancient Egyptians, and how this feeds into the Lionsgate portal, which is essentially a horizon event that happens every year when Sirius, the brightest star in our galaxy, lines up with the sun. So that's just something to sort of bear in mind. Now, as I say, oppositions are all about balance. So for you, this is about the balance between the 2 Venuses. So we've got Venus in Taurus here, which is kind of earthy, and then we've got Venus in Libra here, which is airy. So it's about balancing kind of earthly concerns, the body with the mind. It's also about balancing emotions, kind of heart and head. This is sort of classic heart and head stuff, and this will concern mainly your self-expression, your needs versus those of others, particularly when it comes to one-to-one relationships. So it's about trying to strike a balance in terms of you know, how give and take basically within one-to-one relationships, and also about you know, because it's Mercury, we're talking about self-expression here, so and ideas. So I think it's important that we strike the balance between kind of listening on one hand and being heard on the other. So it shouldn't all be one-way communication, either this way or that way. It needs to be a kind of a sort of a balanced give and take between, you know, kind of explaining what we need and how we feel on one hand, and feeling heard, but then allowing the other person to do the same and listening to what they have to say. And I think the upshot of that is going to be that more balance is going to be restored ultimately. You know, again, sometimes we have to go through rocky patches in order to grow, because let's face it, when things are comfortable, we don't really feel the motivation to make any changes. So I think it's just one of those periods from a kind of cosmic point of view. We're just being pushed a little bit more than usual. So those are kind of the main aspects or elements of this particular full moon. So just having a look at the outcome of your reading, it's really interesting because we definitely have the sense of movement. First of all, we've got the sun in Cancer, which is your sign and your planet. So there's definitely a sense of flux, of movement, of change happening, which I think we've kind of touched on here with this sort of with this emissio. And I think what it's saying is that the more you allow these changes to occur and you don't resist them, the more you surrender to what needs to kind of go and what wants to come in, the happier you'll be. You'll move from kind of sadness down here to happiness, and we see this repeated here with Laitisha being repeated in your outcome. And I think that, again, if you are able to make peace with whatever needs to go, or whatever is not going to be realized. Sometimes it can be about things that we think have potential but that never reach that potential. The sooner the happier we'll be, because we'll be in a place of flow, and that's when new starts can happen. So this is Caput Draconis, which is about new beginnings, new soul contracts, new situations coming in, and I feel that this is heralding what will come at the next new moon. So for me, this full moon for you is all about accepting what you can't change, what perhaps will never come to be, accepting, kind of cutting your losses almost. So if relatives are giving you grief, or if you have experienced some kind of disappointment or loss when it comes to a joint venture, or you know, something to do with the family, like family held assets. Just let it go. There's nothing you can do about it. Accept the change. Realize that you're not alone in this. A lot of people are going through this situation, which I think is quite comforting. And then just allow things to flow, because as they flow, sadness won't stay. You know, emotions and situations can then change. They can then transmute into happiness, because of course everything is fluid. So I really think it's saying go with the flow, accept movement, get sort of like allow yourself to kind of almost be in a river, and allow yourself to sort of float along with the currents of change that are happening on a collective level. And in doing so, in surrendering to that process, you will start to surprisingly feel a lot of joy, and you'll also start to feel on track from a soul perspective. So I think that's actually really hopeful message, Cancer. I hope you have enjoyed this reading. Do let me know in the comments below if it has resonated, and you know, I'd love it if you give me a thumbs up with that like button. Yes, as I say, do check out my video on the I Ching Lionsgate portal message. I think that's very relevant to your reading, as well as keep posted on my social media feeds, because I'll be giving updated astrological information as we go along during this period. So in the meantime, I'm wishing you lots of love, full moon blessings, and I'll catch you again in a couple of weeks for your new moon forecast.